What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's review we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Earthrise Generation Selects Deluxe Class Hubcap. Before we take a look at Hubcap himself, we'll first of all take a look at his accessories. Now, something which I was quite surprised to see is that they haven't just included the direct accessories that we got with Cliffjumper. While some of the pieces are exactly the same as Cliffjumper, they have swapped one of these pieces out. If you recall, Cliffjumper does come with two of these to create a rather long looking bazooka-like weapon, whereas this time around they've actually replaced it with the section that we get with Siege Brunt, which for me, I'm not too sure about yourselves, but looks rather out of place when used with the rest of the missile launcher. Personally, I would have much rather them just repacked the weapons that we got with Cliffjumper, but nevertheless, setting this piece off to the side, I think that the rest of the weapon looks quite nice, and of course you can indeed separate them. I didn't think that this was painted upon first glance, but you can see that the actual peg itself is just a black plastic, and that this has indeed been painted in a grey paint, which is really surprising. I would have rather them had painted it in the Earthrise Cliffjumper silver, but once again I guess that it does set it apart from the previous release, which is quite nice. And we still do have the struts on either side, which are indeed removable. Just taking a look at the weapon that we get repacked from Siege Brunt, you can see that it has just been cast in a grey plastic with a silver paint application applied to the top. And then finally we've got this section that I never really understood its purpose when we did originally get it with Cliffjumper, but I think that it makes for quite a nice weapon when you do incorporate it into the combined form. And you can see that this too has also got some grey paint applications actually painted in there as well, which is quite surprising to see. So this isn't just a bland piece of black plastic, they have indeed painted some of the areas. Just combining this up one more time, another thing that I'm quite surprised about is that there's no real way to configure this so that we get the circular section at the front. So personally, I would have much rather have this combined in a way so that you had the nozzle facing the front. However, no matter what way you combine this, it always has to have the peg section facing the front, which looks really peculiar. So just showing you this, you either have to have it combined how I just showed previously, or you can combine it like this, which once again leaves this huge tab sticking out the front, which to me, once again, does look rather unsightly. So I'm definitely not a fan of that. Just bringing in Cliffjumper's weapon for a comparison, you can see here the differences with the part that we get from Siege Brunt. But other than that, it is exactly the same, just merely done in a different paint deco. So we still do get quite a variety of accessories here with Hubcap. However, I would have much rather have them just repacked the Cliffjumper accessory. But setting those off to the side and taking a look at the Hubcap figure himself, this isn't just a direct repaint of Cliffjumper. This does indeed have some new components such as the head sculpt, but the paint applications on this are really what surprised me. You can see my lighting bouncing off of the actual paint scheme, as they've actually painted this in a really glossy yellow, which I haven't seen a mainline Hasbro figure painted in for a very long time. And when handling it, the paint feels really thick and incredibly durable, and I've transformed this figure quite a few times and have found to have no paint chipping at all, which is really cool. So I do hope that we do see this type of paint application used for future releases. You can see here for the front we've got a really nice looking Autobot insignia. I do love the smoky grey plastic that they've used for the front windscreen as well as the windows, and they've even painted this section here in a glossy black as well to make it look as if though it is transparent, but of course it's not. But I still think the illusion is given off really nicely. The hubcaps are painted in a nice silver, and just flipping it under to the underside, you can see it's exactly the same as what we got with Cliffjumper. The front section is also painted really nicely. No paint bleeds on this whatsoever. I would have liked it if they could have painted these rear lights red. That would definitely would have broken up the yellow paint apps at the back, but I think that this figure is painted quite well, and of course it does roll incredibly smoothly as well, which is definitely really nice to see. Sometimes with these plug-on wheels they can be rather stiff, but here I think that they are pegged on really nicely, and there are no QC issues that I can find on my copy of the figure. Just bringing in Cliffjumper for a comparison, you can see that in vehicle mode, mold-wise, they are exactly the same. There are no changes to the actual molding in vehicle mode whatsoever. It is merely just a paint application, but you can see that they definitely do look drastically different, with this being, of course, a much vibrant yellow, whereas Cliffjumper was indeed a darker red. And you can see as well that here, what I was talking about with the paint on this one being a lot more reflective, it doesn't bounce on the more matte finish that Cliffjumper has nearly as much as what it does here for Hubcap. So definitely the paint apps on this one are super nice. I'm a massive fan of the paint they've used on this, but I'm just really surprised that we did get Hubcap before we got Bumblebee. Perhaps they're planning on giving Bumblebee a completely brand new mold, or just heavily remolding this, as of course this is just really and truly a simple repaint with a new head sculpt. Who knows, only time will tell, but still, as I stated at the beginning of the video, this is definitely a nice enough repaint. And now turning down to Hubcap's transformation, it is exactly the same as that of Cliffjumper, so the parts forming element is as apparent as it ever was. So we just want to come to this section and just remove all this and set off the backpack to the side. Now what we'll do is just separate all of this here. So come to this front section, snapping all of this apart, and repeat the same process here, just getting all of this untabbed. And then we can come to the underside, collapse the wheels in, and then bring these sections back. And then this tab here will peg into one of the slots created by the wheels. So just align that up and snap that in. Reverse this piece back and align this up also and snap that into place. With the arms now, you're going to want to angle them out ever so slightly and then lift this whole section up. As you do that, we can then take this here and collapse this section down. And here we reveal the brand new head sculpt. Just collapse this section in and of course clip these pieces into place. Lift this one up, clip that into place, and then just reverse the arms around and then rotate the waist all the way around as well. Straighten hubcap all out, bring in the backpack, fold out the peg, and of course, exactly like Cliff Jumper, just peg that onto the back. And here we have the Transformers Generation Selects Deluxe Class Hubcap, fully transformed up into his robot mode. And so now taking a look at Hubcap here in his robot mode, I'm sure you'll all agree with me in saying that this is a really nice looking repaint. The stark difference in colour variation to that of Cliff Jumper really does set this figure apart on the shelf and almost makes him look like a completely new figure, especially with that head sculpt. Just giving you a quick 360-degree spin, you can see that this figure has been painted really nicely as well. Almost every single yellow piece on this figure has been painted apart from the forearms and the actual crest section to the head. Everything else, from what I can tell, is painted, which is really nice. Bringing that head sculpt in for a closer look, you can see that this is definitely Hubcap. I love the shade of orange that they've used for the face, very dark, and really does contrast very nicely with the rest of the figure's colour scheme. And I think that the sculpting and detailing too is also quite nice, with the eyes picked out in a more red-like colour as well, which definitely sets them apart from the rest of the orange face. Just taking a look at some of the sculpting and detailing to the helmet as well. I think all that looks quite cool. Even on the back, we've got some nice details. And similarly to Cliff Jumper, the detailing on the actual base figure as well is also quite nice. I once again would have loved an Autobot insignia there on the chest. However, I imagine that perhaps it would have looked slightly out of place when we got him transformed up into vehicle mode. But still, definitely a really cool looking figure. All of the paint apps are really nice and crisp, as well as the molding and detailing. And you can definitely still remove the backpack and utilize this as a shield for Hubcap if you so desire as well. So you can just take that and peg that onto his arm as well, so you can have him having the shield with a much more cleaner look to his back. However, I personally prefer the back actually installed and really wished that Hasbro had found a way to transform this figure with the backpack being unable to be detached. I hate when they do parts form on figures. I know some people prefer it as it allows for easy access to just remove the kibble, but for me I would much rather the Transformers actually transform rather than parts just come off and then reattach in their new designated areas within robot mode. Turning quickly to Hubcap's articulation, we of course do get a ball joint at the head. However, it's very stiff on this figure, so it can look left to right as well as up and down ever so slightly. The arms can rotate the full 360 as well as hinge out to the sides. Full 360 rotation here at the bicep, however once again very stiff. Hinge joints here for the elbows, full 360 rotation there at the wrist, full 360 rotation here at the waist. The legs can kick forwards that far as well as back that far, hinge out to the side. They can also hinge here at this mushroom peg at the thigh, 90-degree bend of motion there at the knee, and finally we of course get the amazing ankle rocker joints that the Earthrise Cliff Jumper was renowned for. So that is great to see that articulation carrying over here for Hubcap. And just bringing in the Earthrise Cliff Jumper for a comparison, you can definitely see in what I was saying earlier on, in the sense that despite these figures sharing the exact same base mold for their bodies, with Hubcap's brand new paint scheme, he really does look like a completely different character and a completely different mold when paired up to Cliff Jumper. And of course, Hubcap's character model is indeed that of Cliff Jumper's, so it was a wise choice for Hasbro just to repaint this figure and give him a new head sculpt. And seeing as Hubcap is one of the more obscure characters to come out of the G1 Transformers universe, it would make sense for him to be packaged in the Gen Selects toy line rather than the main line. But setting that apart, I think that it's a really nice looking repaint and definitely will look great on the shelf. I'm not entirely sure how it will look once I get Bumblebee. Perhaps I'll transform this one up into vehicle mode. I really only got it because it was a yellow version of Cliff Jumper, as I'm not completely familiar with the character of Hubcap. But just showing you how they both look with their accessories. So here we've got Cliff Jumper's awesome looking weapon. And then here we've got Hubcap's rather letdown of a weapon. Once again, I would have much rather them got rid of this section that they included over from Brunt and had just given us the same components that we got with Cliff Jumper. But nonetheless, still definitely a really awesome looking repaint. So that was my review for the Transformers Generation Selects Deluxe Class Hubcap. Personally, as stated throughout this review, I do actually quite like this repaint. Is it essential to your collection? I personally would say not, as the Hubcap is not one of the essential characters to come out of the Transformers universe, and up until this figure was actually released, I had no idea as to who the figure actually was. These Generation Selects figures tend to focus on the more obscure characters from the Transformers universe, and if you are familiar with the character of Hubcap, then I'm sure that you'll be really happy to add him to the collection. The mould of Earthrise Cliffjumper is a great mould despite it being rather small for a deluxe class, and I think with the new paint applications which look fantastic, this figure is painted up really nicely, and with the new head sculpt, I'm sure that you'll be glad to add him to the collection. Some of the down points for this figure for me were the fact that the accessories really suck in my opinion. I would have much rather if them had just repainted this in the exact same way as they had painted Cliffjumpers, and I would have much rather if them had just directly repacked Cliffjumpers accessories so that we could get rid of this ugly section that we got here with Siege Brunt. Setting that complaint off to the side though, I would definitely recommend this. This is a really awesome looking figure. I think that the colour scheme looks great, and as I stated, if you're into the Generation Selects toy line, then you're definitely going to want to add Hubcap here to your collection. So with all that being said, I really do hope that you enjoyed my review. If you did, please do let me know down in the comment section below. Be sure to let me know whether or not Hubcap is a figure that you will be adding to your collection, and whether or not you were surprised to see this figure released before Bumblebee like I was. And until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.